today's video we're going to be taking a look at dent removal. Now I've got a very small dent on the rear near side wheel arch on my Vauxhall Zafira Tourer. It's around about sort of that sort of size, and it is, or certainly was, fairly deep. So what I've managed to do is, using one of those pullers where you put a bit of hot glue onto a little sort of pulling tool, place that onto the dent and then put the puller over the actual tool, little thing over the little thing rather, and then turn the puller. I've actually managed to bring that dent back out so it is almost flush with the surrounding area. It's not perfect, but the result is far more pleasing than it was previously. It's also in quite a tricky area because the particular area where it is double skinned. So what I would potentially have to do is, if I was going to do it properly, was to actually fill the area with a skim of filler, just to sort of bring it back to sort of a completely flush surface. But what I've been doing in this particular video is bringing the dent back as far as I can using the puller, and then just using some touch-up paint to just make it sort of look a bit more presentable. It's not perfect, but the result is far better than it used to be. So, without further ado, let's get into the video.
Earlier in the year, we had a small accident. The neighbour was doing some work on his van, and unfortunately the door blew open and hit my near side rear wing, as you can see here. He offered to pay for damage, but given that it's only a sort of a very small amount of damage, I said no, don't need to pay for it, because to be honest with you, I wanted to see if I could have a go at repairing it myself, and also I didn't really sort of fancy trying to sort of find someone to take a look at it. We're also in depths of winter at the time, and I didn't really want to have any sort of work done on the car, sort of paintwork wise, when the weather was so atrocious. So what I've decided to do was to use one of those pulling kits. So you have a series of attachments that you sort of glue onto the bodywork, and then you use a puller to try and pull the dent physically out. Now, the dent is actually in a fairly difficult place in my view, because as from what I can sort of tell, it's double skinned, and it's also on a point where you've got a change of surfaces. So you've got the flat surface of the arch going onto the slightly curved surface of the actual wing itself. What I did over the winter was I just applied a bit of silver paint, as you can see there, just to sort of cover up the primer. What I've also started doing is cleaning it with a bit of alcohol and just getting rid of any contaminants or polish on the surface, ready for the application of the glue and these little pins which I'm looking at here. So to the left, that's the actual puller, as you can see there. That's the puller itself with the pin that I'm going to be using. You glue it to the side of the car, leave it for about 15 minutes. What I've done here is I've actually glued it to the centre of the dent using just a pea-sized amount of glue. That does seem to spread out and leaves you with that. I then apply the puller itself, and then very slowly just tighten the puller to the point where it actually sort of pulls, or starts to pull, the dent out. It will go to a point where you've pulled it out and it will actually pull the pin off of the panel itself. So it will just basically sort of just pop out or pop off. But the end result is that I did have a panel which was looking slightly better. So here you can see the tool in place here. I'm now turning it to try and bring the panel or the pin closer. You can see, if you look carefully, the actual panel actually coming out slightly. You can see it sort of becoming more flush. It gets to a point where obviously it sort of exceeds the amount that it can pull, or exceeds the amount that the glue can actually hold, and off it pops. The glue I've actually used is this, it's very strong actually, it's this very strong sort of black stuff, which is for, well, it is for glue guns, but it's specifically designed for this particular purpose. It's far stronger than the sort of typical white clear stuff that you have. So you can see here that it's not perfect, but it is slightly more flush with the surface than it was previously. The next thing that I did was I ran through the same procedure around about another 7 or 8 times, just varying the position of this particular pulling sort of pin thing, so that it would sort of pull on different parts of the dent to try and bring the rest of the dent out. And the end result was pretty acceptable. The next thing that I've been doing, which I haven't videoed, is using some touch-up paint to try and sort of blend in the repair. I'm not particularly good with sort of painting, so to speak, so it doesn't look fantastic at the moment. But I've been using a combination of G3 to try and smooth off the paint between coats, and I've also used a bit of 1500 grade wet and dry to try and sort of smooth off the finish as well. What I've done between each coat is I've left it overnight to obviously sort of dry. Another thing you can see here, just very quickly interrupting myself, that is spinning. So you need to hold on. What I did was I actually held on to the end, and twisted the handle there whilst holding on to it, and that allowed it to sort of lock in place and actually sort of go in a bit more. Another thing that I did was I actually tightened it up and got it under tension, and then left it under tension for about half an hour. Just walked away from it, left it for half an hour, came back to it, turned it a bit more, and immediately it popped off. But it had actually brought the panel up a bit, and it's not quite flush, but it's a lot better than it was. So back to the paintwork. Applied a couple of coats of Sovereign Silver, which is the colour that this Zafira is presented in. Roughed it down between coats with a combination of G3 and also what was the other one? G3 and a bit of 1500 grade. And I've just come back indoors after applying the top coat, so the lacquer. What I'm going to try to do sort of during the week is I'm going to leave that lacquer drying and let it all settle over the next couple of days. I'm then going to try polishing the lacquer with a bit of G3 and then some polish, just to see if it does actually sort of, you know, it does actually improve the entire area and make it look a bit better. Incidentally, spraying some alcohol onto the glue between each stage does actually allow it to come off a lot easier. So that is sort of a recommended thing to do, is to obviously just sort of apply some of that, and that does seem to work quite well. It's an interesting sort of little job, to be honest with you. What I'm doing at this particular stage is just trying to get rid of a bit of the glue that's on there. You can see that the paint that I applied has actually pulled off, and we're just left with that primer. So when my neighbour's door actually hit it, he did say that quite a lot of big chunk of paint actually came off of it. He was, bless him, very apologetic, but you know, accidents happen. The car's parked in the back lane, and it's been parked in the back lane for about sort of 5 years. So I think one sort of accident in 5 years isn't too bad, really. It's just one of those things. So as you can see, those are the glue segments that I used. I used a total of about 7 goes in total. Maybe 7 or 8, I can't remember, it was quite a few. I also tried just in the angle that I was pulling, so I would actually sort of physically turn angle the puller upwards, and then wind it out, or wind it in rather, to vary the angle that I was pulling on that sort of particular pin, and that did seem to have sort of quite a good effect, because it allowed me to sort of apply different angles of pressure against the panel to try and pull it out. In my view, it looks a lot more presentable. In fairness, it wasn't exactly unpresentable to begin with, but it was just something that I wanted to try, and it has come up quite nicely. If I had a bit more time, what I would probably do is sand down a bit of the surrounding area using varying grades of wet and dry. Apply a skim of filler just to get it sort of perfectly flat. Then using a proper sort of primer and top coat and lacquer, actually spray the entire area. The issue is, because this car is silver, silver is an absolute pain to actually get right. It really is not an easy colour. So I would probably have to spray that entire wing to actually sort of get a finish which is acceptable. So I don't mind having a small blemish which is not quite perfect. You know, I'd rather have a small area of imperfection than an entire wing that looks like a completely different colour to the rest of the car. But, you know, hasn't come up too badly. Just applying a bit of G3 there just to sort of get the area ready for painting. So, as I say, what I did was I did apply a bit more paint, and, you know, it's come up reasonably well, I'd say. Certainly, if you look at this, the dent is a lot less severe than it was. It has actually come up very nicely. And I can recommend this puller that I've used. I'm actually got quite a big dent on the door of the Micro. I'm actually going to try it on that to see if it pulls that out. It's actually better to try it in cooler weather rather than blazing hot sunshine, because that gives the glue sort of chance to set and actually sort of get nice and cool and actually sort of set properly, rather than trying to do this on a blazing hot day. And yeah, hasn't come out too badly at all. Anyway, if you found this interesting, don't forget to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.